Hi everyone, welcome to Better Together Progressive Horsemanship. I'm Danny Fitzpatrick.
And I'm Eliza Priddle, welcome.
Good to see you all, thanks for joining us. We just wanted to touch briefly on a subject that came up in a private connect yesterday. When working with the student, it was interesting when I was asking him to really pick up on the horse very softly initially. I could see the horse was struggling a little bit and sort of bracing, so I actually stuck my finger in between the bossel and the horse's nose and said pick up softly, and immediately said, wow, way too much pressure. And it was interesting, the response from the student was, he said to me, well, I guess I kind of always thought he's a 500 kilo animal. I had to manhandle him a little bit more for him to feel it, but we all know that they can feel a fly land on their side. And if you want your horses to be really soft and light and responsive, your initial ask must be soft and light, and then go increase the pressure if you need to get a response, but then always start back at the soft feel that you want initially, and that's how you get your horses really soft and listening and light.
And it's an interesting thing because I find, sometimes some people, and it depends obviously on a lot of people's personality, but I find both men and women who are fairly confident in themselves, they'll pick up quite heavy.
Yep.
Whereas people who are unconfident or less self-assured, I guess, in their horsemanship, they'll actually be too light.
Yep.
And there's no sort of feel. And I talk to people about, if I take your hand as a dance partner, do you want me ducking away? Can you follow my feel when I'm doing that?
Yeah.
Or do you want me pulling on you?
Yeah.
Or what is the...
Well, they just meet
halfway in between,
yeah.
That feel, so we can work together. If I take that feel away, you can't stay with me. You can't follow me. And so I get people that are too light as well as way too heavy.
Yeah.
And it's a really cool thing to show people how much feel. We can just use this bossel here. How much feel it takes. When you pick, this one's got a bossel shaper on it, but same thing applies. If I was the horse's head, you pick up on that rein, look how little it takes. See the movement here, that whole movement, that horse feels that. And because it's got the shaper on, it's a bit heavy, so the horse would actually feel it up here around the head before it would feel it on the nose in that instance. But it doesn't take much to put some feel in that. And
I was hung up.
Yeah, so it doesn't take much to put feel in that. See, you felt that, and you weren't even on a horse.
Yeah. So when these are on, and they're really a well-made bossel is very well balanced. And of course, I got the shaper in there. The reason I got the shaper in there, and I made that myself, and I possibly will make some shapers for people. I changed. I actually had it quite a bit bigger, but what I found was this nose button wasn't being brought in enough to wrap around the horse's nose, because I wanted contact all the way through here. This is the shape so that this piece here doesn't mark the horse's jaw, but you still want some sort of contact around there, and so I'm trying to get more of the shape of the horse's head, and that way if we've got contact, because as soon as I undo that, that will actually spring open a little bit. That's why I pulled it in here, because that's going to spring apart a little bit, but it should come back to the shape of the horse's face. And then we've got contact, and then a very light lift of the reins. That horse can feel that all the way around. These are, the Spanish have used these since the 1600s, and it's a great tool, and it used correctly, makes very, very light, responsive horses. But anyway, that's why.
In saying that, you sort of don't want to go to a bossel too early.
No, not too early. I do use a snaffle initially, and some people that are real purists don't like that. But I just find that if I start them in the snaffle before they, I make sure their wolf teeth are out, and I will ride them for 6 to 12 months until all the caps are starting to move. When that stuff's going on between 2.5 and 5 is when pretty much traditionally they were ridden in the bossel and hackamores.
So you're talking, sorry Danny, you're talking the caps of the teeth there?
Yes.
Just so people know,
Yeah, so horses shed all their caps between 2.5 years of age and 5 years of age. And then also in that, I'm trying to think now, I think the first full molars come in around that 3 years of age, and then so they're all in full into wear around 5 or 5.5. I'd have to go back and check.
So
that.
the mouth is changing a lot.
It's changing a lot, and that's why if you're ever, you know, if you have your horses going really well and they're soft and light, and all of a sudden the wheels fall off and you can't work out why, just, you know, get a dentist, or if you know how to do it yourself, get in there and have a look. You might find that caps are lifting off, their mouth is sore, and they've gone from one day being amazingly responsive to the next day, you know, quite cranky with you. And it's generally teeth.
And understand that, you know, the way the jaw moves, if a horse is going to give you soft feel, you know, that when the horse's head is up, the lower jaw is more forward, and as the horse brings its head down, the lower jaw comes back. So that's got to sort of slide a little. And if you've got uneven teeth in there, or caps that are sort of sitting up a little bit proud, that'll stop that happening.
Yeah, yeah. There's a fair bit of anterior posterior movement on the lower jaw. So once that's restricted, which can happen if your horse's dentistry hasn't been done properly, you start to get TMJ pain, and then that's when you'll have, you know, adverse reactions. But that's a whole different subject that I'll talk about. I have studied dentistry, so I do understand a fair bit of that, and have worked as a dentist. So
talking about lightness, you know, we talk about, you know, a Bosal, and that's heavy duty. Like that's hard, and it's meant to be hard because the horse has got to come off the pressure. I see people going into Bosals way too early. You know, I don't go to a snaffle. I ride bitless, of course, so I wait until my horse is, you know, 5, 6 or 7, depending on their education and how well they've come along, before I put it a bit in the mouth, if I ever do. But I start in a halter or a hackamore to get a whole lot of lateral flexion, because I find that lateral flexion comes better in a halter or a hackamore than it does in a Bosal initially. Because you put a horse that doesn't know into one of these and you pull on their face, you'll end up taking all the hair off. Now, that's actually what's meant to happen. A Bosal is meant to be hard in order to get the horse off the pressure, to get them light. If you do it too soon, you're going to end up with a horse that's got a rubbed nose and no lateral flexion, and lateral flexion is where all our softness comes from. So it's a really important thing. You know, people jump on board with Bosals because they look cool and you look like a bit of a dude as a horseman. But in fact, if your horse isn't ready for that, you'll do a whole lot of damage. So, and you'll untrain your horse to be soft, because that can hurt. You know, that's got a lot of pressure on it, and that can put a lot of pressure on a horse that doesn't know what you're asking for, and you're sort of trying to force the feel a little bit. Yeah. You'll end up hurting your horse, and you'll go backwards in your training. Yeah,
I think I can't remember who. It might have been Buck Brenneman that said it. Said the first time, if you've ridden in a snaffle and then you go to the Bosal, first couple of rides, he said, are going to feel terrible. Your horse is not going to respond quite the way you want, and you want to race back to the snaffle. But, you know, and that's a horse that's been ridden for a while in the snaffle, but you just got to stick with it. And often, and the reiners do this, if they change bits, they don't ask for much in the first couple of rides. They kind of let them, they just do the passenger game a little bit, just let that horse wander around, and, you know, just feel for them, pick them up here and there, but don't expect a great.
And pick them up a little bit, which is what we talked about in the video initially, why we're talking about it, because people just think that, you know, they've got to pick up a whole lot. That feel comes the moment you touch those reins, and that's super important. Sometimes,
and if you get your horses light enough, sometimes it's just taking the slack out of the reins.
It's it, absolutely.
You really haven't made contact.
Absolutely.
And that's what I want, and that's why sometimes you pick up a little slower, and you give that horse enough time to respond just to the weight of the reins, and you haven't made contact. But if he gives, now that's another thing I need to talk about, I guess, is it's been said 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, but it's the release. It's when we release that the horse learns. And I see a lot of new riders, and I'll say to them, you know, as soon as the horse gives you what you want, release. And that timing is something you have to learn, and you will get better at it, but also in your mind have a little bit of a picture of what you want, and be prepared to release quickly.
And release.
Yes.
You know, how many times do we see, and it was happening a little bit yesterday, you know, when you pick up on those reins and the horse gives and their releases like that. That's not a release.
No.
It's got to be a release.
Yeah.
When you're first training, like later on, and Danny's got beautiful hands if you watch him ride, his release is just that. And it is a tiny little bit. That's an educated horse, though. When you're teaching something new and you want to release, it should be a release. You know, that horse wants to stretch down and really give. And I see so many people, their release is just that much. It's not enough.
What I do, say that's my horse's neck, if I've picked up on my horse and they've done what I've wanted, I will
drop them.
Just drop the reins and let that horse know. And then I don't always rub on my horses. Sometimes I actually think they just want to be left alone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think sometimes we can get too much into the rubbing on them all the time. So I might leave it for when they do something.
That's
you know,
the hard
really good.
cowboy coming out.
Yeah, sorry about that.
But you're absolutely right. Some horses don't like to be touched.
Yeah, I do see some people that have asked for something and they've got a mediocre response and they're straight away rubbing.
It actually can distract the horse.
Yeah, I think it does distract them a little bit. So I might ask 2 or 3 times, and when I get that really good response, they're doing exactly what I want, then I'll take my time and then give them a little rub and let them just kind of process that.
And one of the things we did yesterday, we were doing in the private clinic that we were doing ranch riding, and we had a really cool pattern set up. And by the end of it, we were doing it at speed, so we're doing it at canter. And now, none of our horses, probably Danny's horse is the most advanced of all of them. Julius is still young, and the other 2 riders were not as experienced, or 3 riders were not as experienced. So when you start to pick up on speed, you can lose a whole lot of collection, you can lose a whole lot of feel, and mentally you can lose a horse. And with Julius, it's really important to me, if I pick up on speed, when I quit, I drop those reins. And he knows, I've taught him, when those reins are done, you're done.
Yeah.
And he can go,
Yeah.
So that's his signal to relax, dude. We came down that pattern pretty quick. We did some turnarounds, we did this, we did that, we did a fairly decent sized jump, got to the end, dropped the reins. Now, how many times in competition do you see people pulling their horses up after they're finished and hanging on to them? It's like, dude, the horse has done his job. What are you doing? Teach that release is good job. You can relax now.
Well, it's one thing that I actually heard Ian Francis talk about, and I thought it was a great idea. And he said, always have a sign off.
Yep.
And that's exactly what we're saying here. So he, when he was done, he had a sign off so that the horse knew.
Absolutely.
Take a big deep breath. We're done.
Yep. We're
wandering off, and so, whatever it is, whether you drop those reins or you put your hand down on their neck or in a certain position, but just let them know that we're done.
And on that, we'll sign off. Enjoy your horses, guys. Drop your reins. Enjoy your horses. Have a great weekend. If it's a weekend for you, we hope to see you next time at Better Together.